Welcome back, everybody. I hope you've had a chance to do whatever you needed to do in the interval. I'd now like to move on to our question and answer session. And what I'd like to do, first of all, is to introduce our panel to you, because our panel are drawn from the length and breadth of the United Kingdom and cover very many different business sectors. But can also remind everybody that if you do have questions, please send them to me. We have a number that I've already got and know that everybody would like to get their questions answered. If you can send them to me, I will try and select as many as I can to be answered. But let me introduce our panel. And first of all, what I'd like to introduce Eileen Richards. Eileen's been involved in recruitment for over 20 years, I believe, and she set up her own company about 8 years ago. She's a former winner of the Niche Business Woman of the Year and is currently president of the East Midlands Chamber of Commerce. In addition to her work for her own business and for the Chamber, she is very involved as a trustee for Hope Against Cancer, which is a local charity focusing on cancer research. In 2019, she was awarded an MBE for her promotion of female entrepreneurship, which I think is particularly appropriate in the basis that this is currently International Women's Week. Hi, Eileen. Alison Mcgeorge is one of the UK's leading retailers, probably best known for his no-nonsense approach. He was formerly chief executive of one of the UK's largest family businesses, the Littlewoods organisation. He then led Matalan through a period of restructuring and is currently the non-executive chairman of New Look. When he's not working or on the golf course, he is chairman of the Retail Trust, an organisation that looks after people in need who have been involved in the retail trade. Kenny Milne comes from one of Scotland's best known rugby families. He and his two brothers all played for Scotland, and Kenny was capped 39 times. He was part of Scotland's Grand Slam winning side in 1990. After rugby, he moved into the printing business and eventually led an MBO of the business, which he then sold last year. However, he still remains involved as a consultant as he continues to give the company the benefit of his experience. And finally, Vikram Kamerkar is a board member of UK Business Advisors and also chairman of the Southwest Group. He has worked for a number of global organisations and also spent 6 years at EY. Vikram specialises in delivering unique learning programs designed to help people thrive in an unpredictable future, in addition to helping a number of SMEs with general business advice. So welcome to our panel. And hopefully we will have an interesting discussion over the next hour. My plan is generally just to ask questions which I would normally expect everybody will want to make a comment on, and I'll just direct the questions initially to one and then another panel member. If we get questions from the floor which are specific to one panelist, then obviously I'll target that person only. And I'll be more than happy if either any of the panel wish to get involved in a discussion or a debate with any of the other panelists if they don't necessarily have the same view on the response to a question. So if I'd start with my first question, which is, what do you see as the biggest impediment to successfully exiting the current downturn? And how do you suggest we deal with it? And can I, on ladies first, push this to Eileen first of all?
Yeah, of course. I think it's, it's confidence or maybe lack of it. I think, currency is business currency at the moment. And over the last 12 months, businesses have only really been able to plan in really short-term periods. We're looking at weeks as opposed to sort of months and years. And I think the roadmap to unblocking the current set of national restrictions has already started to stimulate businesses to give them more confidence really for the future. And I think interestingly, the Chamber's latest quarterly economic survey, it does show, I'm sure nobody will be surprised by this, that cash flow is still the greatest challenge for business. However, investment in things like, investment in training and development, and actually businesses looking to increase their headcount seem to be, quite promising.
Alistair, do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly in my industry, I think the biggest impediment will be leadership, actually. I think we've got too many operators running businesses, and there's a difference between an operator and a leader. And I think certainly in my own sector, businesses won't get away with just trying to come out of this pandemic by being the same as they went in. And they're going to have to change. And that's where leadership's going to be required, because leadership drives change, operators don't drive change. So I think that will be a big impediment. Sadly, I think we're going to see more businesses fall over, because until people actually have to start to pay their bills, they don't know whether their cash flow is good enough. And sadly, I think we will see some more, but we are finding the government amenable to doing deals, and I'm sure we'll find more land. And people have just got to be prepared to ask the questions. But ultimately, I think good leadership is through this and out the other side, and will start to transform businesses and industries to be what it needs to be going forward, not what it's been in the past.
Kenny, do you want to add anything on that?
Just really, I agree with Eileen that it's going to be about confidence, people having the ability to sort of look to the future and plan for the future, long term, not short term. I think a lot of people have probably cut back on the basics of marketing and research and development at this time. Obviously, some companies have diversified, and that's been successful for them. But really, I think you've got to get back on the support financially. And I think the government's got a big part to play in this by supporting the businesses and encouraging the spend to create opportunities for all businesses out there.
And finally, Vikram, do you want
to? I echo all of the points made earlier, and my complementary point to all of this is going to be we're going to have to go through a mindset and behavior change, and that is the real tough part of all of this. I'll give you a simple example. Some of the companies that have tackled this head on is brilliant example is Unilever. They spent over a year getting all of their 160,000 employees going through what they call their Unleash Your Purpose training. And that's a massive investment. And the whole point of that was to help people think through, why am I here? What am I going to do? What am I going to do for the future? And we all are going to have to go through that. So, like Alistair said about the leadership, or Eileen said about confidence, this is all about that. Is what do I see myself doing, and how do I go and tackle the future? And that's what really the millennials and Gen Z want. If you think about the next generation, that's what they're looking for in companies as well. And they're the ones who are going to help us. I mean, the leaders, provide the overall environment. So there's that challenge. And then the people who actually go and execute it are going to be the millennials and Gen Zs. And how do you bring them along on that journey? And it's that mind shift, the behavior. And a simple example is about 100 years ago, if you look at the photographs of New York, it was covered in horses, all the streets. Horses were the transformation. In 1915, 1916, you won't see any horses on the streets. They had only cars. Can you imagine the behavior change that everyone had to go through to understand how horses work on the street? We haven't had that for the last 75 odd years. And this is the decade when we're going to experience that level of change. And so we're just going to have to get used to that kind of behavior change.
Interestingly, you seem to refer to the fact that the reliance has to be on the millennials, that it's the younger generation that are going to drive this change or going to provide the leadership.
I wouldn't say, I would say that they are slowly getting into positions of leadership. I mean, my generation is fundamentally in leadership positions right now. But even if you get leaders in that kind of mindset change, millennials are looking for this. Leaders are going to have to rely on millennials to bring them into the company and make that change happen. And millennials are looking for companies like that. And a number of companies I work with, one of their biggest challenges is actually getting the really talented people to come in and stay with them.
So following on, how do we encourage talented people then to come in, Alistair? Because you're referring very much to the fact that there needs to be a change of attitude.
Well, quite frankly, we need to support them. We need to help educate them. I look at most businesses. What have they? The first thing they do is cut the training and development budgets. Yes, if you don't invest in training and development, you don't educate your people. We need to fast track people. I love fast tracking people. As soon as I get involved in businesses, I find people. Sometimes it doesn't work. I over promote them and it fails. But generally, when you see someone fly, it's great to watch them fly it at the end of the day. But we are going to have, it's all about people at the end of the day. It's interesting, right throughout the pandemic, we've actually spoken to our employees probably more than we've ever done. We've invested in their mental health. We provided them with physical classes, yoga classes, all these, and they really welcome all of this. And actually, I actually sense we're more focused on our employees than we've ever been in the past. And at the end of the day, if we don't motivate them, they don't deserve to stay with us, quite frankly. Now, we've also got to help them in terms of what leadership means and how to become real leaders. It just doesn't happen. You don't become born overnight, generally. But many of the things that we stopped doing, we've got to start doing them again.
So we're all perhaps saying that this is all about making people better.
Absolutely, you can have the best strategy on the planet, but at the end of the day, it's culture and leadership and people that make it come alive. And it's proven that those that feel good about working for our company will go the extra mile, and it's the extra mile that counts.
Okay.
I agree. Sorry, David.
No, carry on. I'm happy for the interaction.
I completely agree. And whilst I've had a lot of experience with corporates, I've been working with a couple of SMEs that really overinvest in people. And what they found is, as a result, not only are their employees happy, they're contributing to the company in a way that they hadn't expected about 10 years ago. And as a result, and if you're looking at it just from a bottom line perspective, their profitability has gone through the roof. And companies that invest in their people in terms of whether it's training, whether the working patterns, or helping them solve their own personal problems, whatever it is, when they feel that they're being invested in, the returns are way greater than any investments in technology, processes, or any other aspect of your company. And certainly that was my experience when I worked as a consultant in the city, is there was a definite difference in companies that invested in people and companies that just invested in the other aspects of their company.
I presume, Eileen, you see a lot of that from your recruitment background.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say, with the way the world is at the moment, it's a very candidate driven market out there. Looking at the younger generation, I think businesses are really seeing an appreciation for having, we need our seasoned workers like myself in businesses, but that younger generation coming through and that sense of confidence. And actually, the questions that are being asked are more, years ago, it would be, have they got investors in people? That seems to have disappeared, doesn't it? Just gone nowhere. Now it's questions like, how do they invest in their people? How do they communicate and celebrate success? But also, there's lots of questions around ESG and the CSR contribution as well, because businesses want to work for companies that are proud to work for, that genuinely make a difference to the business, to the whole community, and that's supporting other businesses, charities, and the business community in general. And I think we're doing a fabulous project with De Montfort University at the moment, and I'll just share this with you quickly. We asked them all, there was 20 students that we've paired with 20 companies. So we thought we'll make this quite, we want them to feel quite confident. So just tell us one great thing about yourself. We were absolutely blown away, the Princess Awards, walked mountains all over the world, but they related it all back to the mindset and, how they were really pushing themselves and that resilience. So yeah, I think that investment, don't underestimate the younger people coming through, because they're, really, really impressive.
You probably, more than anybody, have seen the benefit of teamwork.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm a great believer that if you make everybody a team, but one of the challenges smaller businesses have is if you spend a lot of time, energy and money investing in people, sometimes these people become too big for your own organization, and therefore it's soul destroying to actually invest much, then become very ambitious and want to join bigger and larger companies because they see a better future for them. And if you've got a small company and you want to kind of keep it to that size, but still produce a good service, good quality, and making good profit, it's sometimes very difficult to hold on to these people, because not everybody can be a manager, a managing director, a director in a small company. And that is, I think, one of the reasons why maybe some of the smaller companies don't maybe invest in people as much as they should do, because of this fear that they actually outgrow the company and become too good for you, and therefore the money and the resource you put in there, fundamentally somebody else is going to benefit from.
I suppose the quid pro quo for that is that other companies will invest in the same thing for their people, and who might come and work for you as the world goes round, I suppose, when it comes to that. Does it not?
I'd never invest in anybody if they took that approach. They lose 99% of their people who end up working for many other organisations.
Yeah, but, I mean, again, you don't know the answer to this, but I'm guessing that people spend far more time moving from job to job now than they did 30, 40 years ago. And that people have spent 2 years in one organisation, 2 years in another organisation, etc. And therefore what they do is they bring these skills that they learn in one to the next company and so on.
I think that's a very valid point, and as well as what Kenny's talking about is this concern that I'm going to invest in someone and I'm not going to get the benefits out of it. I was briefly head of learning for EY's financial services advisory business, so I was responsible for the skills and development for about 4,000 people across 3,000 people across EMEA. And one of the key changes I brought in was aligning what our training schedule is and our, I guess, courses to the business objectives. So we are very clear about what are we trying to achieve 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and therefore, what are the people skills we need? And when you go through that process, you start focusing in on what are you trying to get out of the company and how are you going to define success through your people. Once you start doing that, the leakage issue becomes less of a problem because you're focusing in on what are you trying to get out of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think going back to what you said originally, David, people do move around more now, but businesses kind of accept that more as well. I don't think people interview now expecting somebody to, be with you for life. I think it's, it goes back to people saying, don't be scared to recruit somebody that's maybe better than you. I think businesses are, are much more open and accepting of doing that. And just picking up on what Vikram's just said, it's businesses, in order for a business to be truly understood, everybody in that business has got to understand what they do and what the business objectives are. And, we talk a lot about skills, and skills are great, but so are qualities, because, a quality in a person is what defines your DNA actually. And you can't train that. Skills you can train. So I think whilst training is really important, what are we actually training people for sometimes? Because not everybody has to go on the same training course. So, and I think businesses now do hire on attitude. Of course, there's businesses that there's a certain sectors that, whether it's legal, you might look for a certain level of experience. But more and more people are looking at, somebody's qualities and their attitude, because they'll offer so much more to a business than, perhaps somebody that ticks every box from a skill point of view.
It's funny, David, all my experience, rightly or wrongly, has been with businesses that needed turnaround. So I only generally do turnarounds, which generally means we need a different answer. Carrying on with the same answer, is the definition of insanity. So we tend to always start with working with the people in delivering a real purpose. Why does the business exist? Why does it need to exist? And we gradually build that down in terms of a strategy where we want to get to. Then in terms of our values and how we want to work. And then we assess what sort of structures that we need to deliver that. And the last thing we actually go to is people. We don't pigeonhole people in the wrong boxes. We look at what sort of people and skills do we actually need. And inevitably you find that you have actually many people who've done a great job, but actually then they do not have the skills that are required to do whatever you need to do now. And we always we part very amicably with them. We help them move on, rather than we waste another year of their life proving that they haven't got the skills or don't want to do the job. So, we spend quite a lot of time on that, because I'd rather do it quickly rather than, everybody I've ever met who ends up parting with someone always goes, they wish they'd done it 6 months or a year ago. When in fact, if they'd just been intuitive and proper about it, they could have done it 6 months or a year ago.
All right, let me move on to another question. And will history at any time suggest that COVID was actually good for business? Alistair, I'll start with you on that one.
I'm not sure that anyone is ever going to put their neck out and say COVID was a good thing to happen. So, listen. However, that doesn't mean to say that some good might not come out of it. So if I look at it, it has accelerated quite a number of trends that were already there. For instance, in my tech, obviously it's brought pure plays more to the fore. Omnichannel, in my opinion, will win at the end of the day, but it's brought those trends forward. And that's no bad thing, actually, because it's going to force my industry to wake up even more and start to think about what answer is going to win with customers going forward, rather than keep trying to perpetuate a very old-fashioned model that was losing. And as we've seen, some very big household names have gone down. What I also think it's done, it's brought things like homework into the fore. We found we've been able to work very successfully with many of our staff at home. Whilst the first lockdown, I think most people never thought they'd come back to work. After this lockdown, I found most of our staff want to come back to work, so there'll be a balance there. I think we're finding out people do want organisations that contribute to their communities. They want organisations that have got that are truly green, yes, and do contribute to the world. I think we're finding, as I said before, we're having to be more employee focused than ever, and that's no bad thing. And I also, just from walking around my own communities for the first time, I actually sense people have actually become a little kinder, actually, to each other.
Mm.
I think these are bad things going forward, and I hope we can continue to build on them. Hopefully, not in a totally non-COVID world, but in the world that comes after it.
Kenny, do you want to add anything?
I just think that it's, it's never been a good thing, but 5 years' time, I think people will have looked back on it and thought actually it's created thinking outside the box, given other people opportunity in different industries. There's certain industries have thrived because of diversification. Probably the spirits industry is one in providing hand gel and things like that. I think the working from home one, I think we've got to remember it shouldn't just be about, oh, my employee wants to work from home. It should be about what is best for the business. And it may well be what's best for the business is them working from home all the time, or not working from home, or a mixture of both. But I think that conversation's got to be had with your members of staff and decide which way you want to go as a business and what is best for the business, because fundamentally that's why you employ people, is to make sure the business works and delivers the service you're wanting it to do. So yeah, I think it's created thinking, it's created opportunities for people, and hopefully it'll create a better working solution for people by having that nice balance of maybe working a wee bit from home, but also working at your place of work, because I think the communication aspect's very key on that. And as you said, it's interesting, first lockdown, people were happy working from home. I agree with Alistair that, this time people are now going, actually, I quite like to get into the office 2 or 3 days a week, which I think's got to be a good thing for the whole work environment and the team environment side of things.
Eileen?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think history will definitely judge COVID as being a reset for business. I know it certainly has for mine. I think some of the key areas for me, it's really accelerated the digital transformation strategies, by years, really. I think businesses, as well as they've just said, is, it's really enhanced the well-being across businesses and the agile working pattern that's now in place. But I completely agree what Ken has just said, and it has got to be what's right for the business first, and then looking at that sort of agile working around it. I think the other thing is, with some businesses I work with, it's really opened a global marketplace for them because of the way that they've embraced technology. And I think the technology thing is great, and it has enhanced many areas. But for me, let's not completely go back to not doing any face-to-face, because that's where the relationships genuinely grow from strength to strength. So I hope we don't go too far in that way, but I do think that a lot of my clients that we work with that said we will never look at agile working, we need everybody in the office every day because we have to all be together, have now got everybody pretty much working from home and thinking more the other way, do we have to go back? So I think that there will be some real positives that come out of it.
Okay. Vikram?
Well, I mean, definitely, I think we can all agree COVID was a really bad event, and we're still living through it. But the silver lining through all of this is, as everyone said, it's pulled the future forward really rapidly. And for me, it's in a few areas. The first area is it's pulled technology forward very, very quickly. And that's great. I'm an anorak, so I'm always going to love lots of technology coming forward really quickly. But much, much more importantly, and I think everyone's talked about this in one way or the other, it's brought a sense of humanity and purpose. And you see it in the social media, you see it in the way people converse with each other, how we're much more forgiving. When suddenly children pop up and dogs pop up in video calls and all the rest. And it's from small things like that, but also companies who quickly diverted their resource into figuring out how do we help the community. And that kind of mindset change, which is what we talked about a few minutes ago, is happening. So, for me, that is much, much more important, that change in society in terms of figuring out who are we and what are we about.
So does that mean that everybody, I'm talking about the panel now, are far more confident of how we will operate as businesses going forward than they might have been 5 years ago?
I think it's going to be a real challenge because, okay, very, very quickly, you know, we've got to change the way we do business. And as we've all discovered, when we put ourselves through change, whether it's in our personal life, you know, for me, for example, trying to lose weight, it's really difficult. You know, you've got to go through a whole series of serious mindset changes to achieve that objective. Businesses are no different. You know, if you're trying to say, think differently, well, what does that mean? How do I do that? It's so easy to say, but actually fairly difficult to execute. And then how do I bring my organization along with it? And certainly my experience when I worked on major transformation projects is about 70% fail for a whole bunch of reasons. And it's scary. It does put us through a lot of stress and grief. And it's one of the reasons why I'm really keen to understand and help people through that change, as well as get that mindset around being comfortable with change. And it's not easy.
So David, take my own business. We've historically been a large store business, yeah, with stores all over the world at one point, yeah. And we eventually tacked on an online business, yeah. But we always thought about stores first, and then we thought about online. If we're going to win going forward, we're going to have to be digital first, because the biggest part of our offer and services is offered digitally. And then we're going to have to work out a new role for it, having a store. Yes, it might be about offering some small amount of product, but it needs to be able to market the whole range of services that are offered digitally. So in effect, we're going to have to stand the business on its head with a group of people that have basically done it the other way. And what you tend to find is, so we're asking people to stand on their head. Well, I don't know anyone doing a headstand that can have their feet on the ground, but they think they can tilt. Well, tilt doesn't want to do it. If you want to do a headstand, your feet have got to get off the ground. Now you've got to be prepared to fall over, yeah, and learn to get up. And it's going to require some great leadership to get people to do headstands, because they're comfortable standing on their feet.
Have we got great leaders?
Well, I certainly, I don't think generally in my industry we have, but you know, and I think that's a real sad indictment, because you know, we've had too many owner entrepreneurial businesses that have created mini-me's who are not as good, and leadership hasn't been that important. So but for those that can do it, don't get me wrong, they will win. There will be winners. And for those that don't do it, well, quite frankly, I would argue they don't deserve to exist. But it won't be because they don't know what to do. It'll be more around people and the how and the why and the culture.
Yeah.
Rather than what. I don't know a business that didn't know what to do, that they just couldn't get it done. So, as I say, the purpose, the culture, the leadership is what will get it done, not just having some great ideas.
Yeah, I think leadership, that's really interesting, Alison. I think, you know, leadership it's really underestimated, and actually I think it's a whole different discussion maybe for another day, because, you know, even when people are hiring, and not necessarily just through us, I'm not saying that, but it's just, how do you measure that leadership skill in an interview? And I think it goes back to what we said earlier about skill. We might look at skill within an industry, but to be a leader of people and not just a manager of people is really different. And I've seen this lots throughout the last year, where people have been expected as leaders to change their way of working and thinking, but lead other people as well, whether it's through working from home, you know, thinking of doing things differently as a business, well-being, you know, these people are coaching people on well-being, and they've probably never been coached on that themselves. So I think it's really underestimated. And, you know, I think it's, you ask people how they define leadership, and you get a very different answer from most people. So I agree with what you said, Alistair, and it's culture and it's embedding that.
I think the other thing we have seen though, looking at leaders, is some people just don't want it anymore.
Absolutely.
I've seen people close their businesses that have run businesses for a long time. They've had this work-life balance that means something different now to what it ever did, you know, throughout the years, and it's been used a lot. But I think people, I mean, my favourite word is choice, and I think people are making choices to suit themselves. And, you know, as I say, businesses are closing, people are leaving organisations, and I think that's a good thing if they're doing the right thing for them.
I mean, running large organisations isn't becoming more appealing. I mean, I can end up in prison for most things, yeah, and it isn't, you know, and there are certain types of people who want to do the job, yeah, and I think Annie's right. It's becoming less appealing for most. They'll make and it's good to see people making choices. That's no bad thing.
I think an important aspect of good leadership for me is emotional intelligence. I think we define leadership so much in terms of strategy and in terms of processes and what they can do, but that emotional intelligence to really understand, are they bringing their people along with them and you know, engaging with them appropriately. I wouldn't say gets forgotten, but it's certainly a poor orphan, and it takes a while to develop that emotional intelligence. And certainly, I mean, it was a huge development point for me for many years to actually shut up and listen.
Okay, let me move on a question then. Purely from a business perspective, if you had a magic wand and you could go back in time, what's the one thing that you would change, Kenny?
I suppose the one thing I would change would be have confidence in the business and your own ability, and don't necessarily seek help from others or partnerships. I think to run a business for yourself and to stand and fall by your own decisions would be probably one thing I would probably, if I could turn the clock back, try and do and run the business for myself, because then that way you stand and fall by your decisions and you get rewarded by your endeavour and your decisions as well. You're not compromising anything. I sometimes feel maybe I've done too much compromisation in my own career in the past, and if I'd been on my own, I would have been solely responsible for what I had to do and what I didn't do.
Having said that, that wouldn't necessarily preclude you from taking advice.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Just as I said, it'd be better to be in more control, I would think. But, you know, I'm a great believer, surround yourself with good people and you never stop learning, whether it's in, you know, sporting terms, whether it's in business. The day you stop learning is the day I think you struggle as a business or as a sporting entity.
Eileen, if anything, what's the one thing you would change if you could go back in time?
Communication. I think unprecedented was a word that I never really used a lot before this, and it's definitely a word I hopefully will never use a lot since, because it's just been so overused. But I think better communication at the start of the pandemic would have really allowed, you know, businesses to plan better and deal with the effects of the pandemic. I mean, I found out about this from a Leicester point of view on Twitter, you know, so I think communication, it would, you know, would be the one thing that I would say.
And communication has always been a bugbear, whether it's from a personal or a business perspective, for quite a number of years.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the old truths. Every time you go and look at a business, you always talk about communication. And it's interesting, Alistair made the comment, not speaking for him, but, you know, he communicates a lot more with his employees now than they ever did. And that probably is a strength of the business now as opposed to where it was a year or 5 years ago.
Yeah, and I think something else Alistair said, you know, and I've learned this over the years, is just dealing with things. You know, when we don't communicate, we know when something's not right, you know, and like you say, David, whether that's personally or in business. And it's perhaps the things that doesn't stop you from falling asleep at night, but it keeps you awake if you wake up in the middle of the night, because it's just that little niggle, isn't it, in the back of your head. And I think, you know, for me, that stronger communication and just not necessarily just going with your gut, but going with your experience and what's right, and dealing with it in the right way, obviously, but making sure that we're dealing with it.
Alistair, if there was one thing you could change, what would it be?
It'd be two.
Okay.
Firstly, I always wish I'd recognised quicker that the success of a business is down to how everyone else feels, not how I feel. And secondly, if I had my time again, I'd have moved twice as quickly and been far more intuitive.
I mean, you made that comment a couple of times today that you feel that even you have been slow off the mark to do things that you ultimately did.
Yeah, no, I'm getting quicker.
Is that a general feeling that everybody recognises, that, you know, as either as businessmen, women, or as advisors, that we may instinctively know what we should do, but we often chew the cud, so to speak, for far too long before we actually put that into practice?
Yeah, we're too intellectual about it. Absolutely. I tend to follow my heart.
It's having the confidence not to be fearful to go for what you think is right. And that is really my point of saying to do things on your own. At least you're in charge of your own destiny, and you can actually just drive that forward if you feel it's the right thing to do. Whilst if you've got others that you don't have that, they don't have the same thought process as you, it's difficult to do change, and it can take longer than it should actually need to take.
I mean, David, I might have been lucky, and all my situations tend to be turnaround. So by definition, you have to do something different. Yes, we're not going to win. But trust me, if you gave me a really good business, I'd still break it apart and try and put it back together differently. So, what do they say? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'd say, if it ain't broke, break it. And think about.
That's a very interesting comment. I think we'll take that one away from today. Vikram.
One of the best pieces of advice I was given, and I wasn't intelligent enough to really understand it, was a very good friend of mine and I joined Intel about the same time, the beginning of about 2000. And this is Carlos Santos, who's now the CFO of AstraZeneca in Latin America. He said, Vikram, every 5 years, you've got to change significantly where you're doing something. You've got something new you're doing. And if you're not working towards that, you're fundamentally a failure. Well, he used lots of interesting words. And it took me way longer than I think, reflecting back, I should have. And it's one thing I kind of drill into, Indian families and extended networks. I keep on drilling into my children and nephews and nieces and all the rest, and they just get bored with me. But I would say it's one of the biggest lessons going forward, especially as the world's going to keep changing at a faster rate of knots. And even if we're not aiming for a 5-year change, it's keeping in mind, and this is why the name of my company in terms of Minerva Lifelong Learning is, and a couple of people talked about it, you need to force yourself to constantly learn new skills into areas that you're not necessarily comfortable with, and then redesigning but developing a new you every few years, whatever that horizon is, and whatever you're comfortable with. Because as comment earlier, we can't all become chief execs and astronauts, but we still need to keep a job 30 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that, and I think it's what you've said about the every 5 years on there, Vikram. It's the courage to change as well, isn't it? But I think it's also, for me as a business leader, we can't be good at everything, and that's where if you're not going to recruit somebody into the business, outsource that talent. if there's somebody out there that can do it better than you. I think when I first started in business, it was trying to keep costs low, definitely trying to do it all myself. I was head of finance, head of head of marketing, head of people. I could do that. I was good at that. But I was head of everything, and I wish that I'd realised that sooner, because nobody actually said that to me. If you don't want to make that commitment to recruiting, outsource that and choose that right business partner to do that. I'm doing that at the moment. I won't say because it will sound like a real plug, but the person on the call will know who they are. But we're kind of using that with each other and the very unique talents that we've got. But that takes courage as well, doesn't it, to commit to the cost of some of those things.
So let me ask the panel a general question. Right? Because it's interesting that in all the discussion that we've had over the last 40 minutes, 45 minutes, no one's actually mentioned things like cash and finance. And 10 years ago, I am certain if I'd been chairing a panel and we were discussing, what people should do to strive, to thrive, to improve, to be successful, the first thing that somebody would have said to me, manage your cash, make sure you do this, make sure you do that. Are we in danger of moving too far away from that now?
No, I think that's just taken as a hygiene factor now, David. It's not good enough on its own. So all these businesses have been managing the cash. They still went down. What they weren't doing is looking to the future enough, changing enough for the future, and basically any business fails because it runs out of money. So that just has to be taken as read. And let's be honest, most people start, if they've got a cost cut, they start too late, so they never get the benefits in time. They don't cut deep enough. I was always taught cut as hard as possible, because if you've got it wrong, then the art of putting something back's healthy. If you never cut deep enough, you're always doing it, and you'll never get over it, and you'll never move the business on and the culture on, because actually culture in cost cutting it's not a great time for the business. You want to get through it and move on as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, hygiene factor or just an operational factor. I mean, you need to have the processes and the reports and the transparency and the communication around it. But the bigger picture is always around a combination of where am I going? Is that the right direction? Can I be flexible about it? Do I have the people along on the journey with me? And I think that focus has really changed. And then you then look after all the operational side of things in terms of, have I got the steps to get there, and am I managing my cash or profitability and all the rest? Certainly, I mean, let me use the example of Amazon, and I have some unique insights because of a family who work there. Their focus and their culture is what they call day one. Think of the company as a startup on the first day of it being set up. And you have to demonstrate that you're in that kind of mindset. They don't really look at profitability apart from, is it likely, that's a kind of hygiene factor, as Alistair said. They first look at what ideas are you generating? Where are you going with this? Can you make it happen? And now go do it. And then bring people along on that journey. Or even Google, which, 25% of its time, I remember when Google was first set up and I visited them in Silicon Valley, was at least one day a week, you have to spend on something completely new. So things like Gmail, Maps, Android, Android they bought in, but they developed it. Quite a lot of the things that are part of our everyday life now were just side of desk ideas for someone in Google.
But what's scary, Vikram, is you're now being asked to compete against people who generally don't know whether they make a profit at the moment. That's quite scary.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, what's funded Amazon, for example, is their internet services. So the store until recently, really didn't make money. It was funded by the fact that at least 40% of the internet is run on Amazon Web Services, and they use that to fund the rest of their operations. So there's a whole question around, anti-competitive behavior there. But you're right, Alistair. That's the kind of competition we're up against.
Well,
big guys.
These organisations, they're not really about web services. They're not about retail. Ultimately, if you look at the top 10 major companies in the world, they're all about control.
Yeah.
Come across a generation that is happy to be controlled, yes, and be told what to do and learn everything online. That isn't probably the generation that's doing the talking here, and I find that quite frightening, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it's data and how you control it.
Absolutely.
All right. One more question for us. There's been a suggestion that, and this will particularly put this to Alistair first of all, there's been a suggestion that COVID has sounded the death knell for the high street. Do you agree with that? And as a follow-up, what business sectors, in your opinion, will be best placed to capitalise on the new normal? Alistair.
Well, no, I don't agree with that, but let's go back quite a long time. Did we ever think we'd see a bookshop again on the high street? They found a way to survive and offer a service. It's very personal, and some of them are starting to thrive again. All it will do is change the role that stores play on the high street. I mean, in fashion, go 5 years out, 60% of turnover still will be taken through a store. So people do want to shop and buy clothing in a store. But what we've done over the years is we've become too anal about it, too cost-driven about it. We don't provide a service. We don't provide an experience like we used to, yeah? And it can't carry on like that. Shops have got to start providing good experiences for their customers. And I'm a great believer. I don't think there will be many pure play winners at the end of the day. I don't think there'll be many shop-only winners, unless they're really local businesses. But I think there will be omni-channel businesses will be the ones that win, that offer customers always to shop in whatever they choose to do at any point in time. I think they will be the winners ultimately. And there again, and I also see people who truly develop brands will win, because brands create an emotional experience with their customers and they want to buy it for a reason than just price. So yes, high streets will change and their roles will change, and yes, we've got less shops at the moment, but I don't think it will signal the death knell of them, no.
And as the follow-up, if you weren't a retailer, what sector would you like to be in? Where do you think that the greatest opportunity is?
Well, actually, people calling me a retailer is actually wrong. I've never been I have zero knowledge or interest in ladies' clothing. I can assure you, my wife could tell. I've run fashion businesses all my life, and my wife just laughs. She just finds it so amusing, but she doesn't realize I actually don't pick the dresses. Someone else does. But my major interest all my life's been in people and how you get people to do things they didn't think they could do, which gives me the biggest thrill in life when they do that, including myself. Yeah, people have done it for me. And so it isn't so much about the what, it's always been about leadership and the how and the why.
Like weekend, we shouldn't call you Mandy. Going back to the old folks one.
But
okay, so does anybody else want to make a comment on what sector, what business would be best placed to benefit?
I think looking at the high street depends, David, and what high street you're looking at. There's a world of difference between the high street in a city centre like Edinburgh or Leeds or somewhere like that, or your local town high street. And I think there's going to be two different challenges there. I agree with Alistair. I think that some of these big stores may reduce in size by offering more of a online presence, but still have a facility where people can visit a store and actually view their products. And how they achieve that, I don't know. I see somewhere like Edinburgh, maybe the restaurant and coffee culture thriving, but also the boutique unique stores where people enjoy the shopping experience and want to go in, and actually it's a day out for them to go uptown, go into some of these jewelers, whatever, these types of stores, and sit and have their coffee and go for their lunch. So it's a whole day experience. So I don't think the high street's dead and gone. I think it will evolve and it will change. And I think people will use it as a day out to enjoy themselves. And I think shops have got to adapt. But I think Alistair's right that the online, they've got to be offering everything. The online presence is obviously the way forward, but I still see for advertising and brand awareness, the big stores will need to have some sort of presence in the high street, but it might be a reduced size of store and offering a different experience.
David, COVID's done significantly more damage to the stores in the major cities. Major city centres. Local has actually is held up pretty well when the shops are allowed to open. And I think local will always win because it's providing a different service. It's local, yes. But if you look at Oxford Street, for example, it's a desert. We'll have no travellers. We could argue that maybe only 60% of the workforce will be in an office at any viewpoint. These premises that have charged significant in all major cities are going to have to change because there isn't going to be the volume of people there for a start.
And interestingly enough, that was one of the points that Ian Stewart made in his comment, where he said that there definitely going to have to be a change to the whole infrastructure that's set up to deal with city centre.
Absolutely. So I don't worry about my local high street; it'll thrive. I from a property and what we do, I worry about the big cities.
Okay. Eileen, do you want to add anything on this?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it is sort of death on the high street. I think it's accelerated trends towards more the online shopping massively. But I think even before the pandemic, I think town and city centres were under scrutiny really as to how they need to adapt for the future. And it's people want the experience. It's that experience rather than feel it's retail. So I think it's that creating a vibrant town and a vibrant city centre feeling, and the retail is obviously a big part of that.
Yeah.
Vikram, yeah.
I can't wait to go shopping. I've shopped on. I can't wait to go back into a shop and shop.
Is that just so you can get out of the house and actually have an experience?
The experience. I think you miss going into the shops and trying things on,
Yeah, I mean, building on what Alistair and Eileen and Kenny said, this whole thing around personalization and customization is what going to be one of the key areas of success, and that local shops do that much better because they understand their local market better. Big high street brands, it's buy it or leave it kind of approach to shopping. And an aspect of this is, for a lot of companies, the larger companies certainly that I've seen, digitalization is all about the IT function in the back office. It's understanding how to bring it into the front and use that to your advantage is what's, for me, certainly missing. And so I've seen some great examples of this in last year, this time when we went into the first lockdown. We had a local garden centre. I live out in just outside Trowbridge. It's a county town of Wiltshire that nobody's ever heard of, and I'm quite proud to live where I am because it's nice, calm, and fairly laid back. And when everyone went into lockdown, of course, that was springtime and prime gardening season. They didn't have a fancy website, but what they did, and they didn't set up online buying. All they did was put a PDF up to say, this is our order form, please fill it out, email it to us, and then we'll do our best to deliver at a reasonable price in a reasonable time scale to you. We're not making any promises on prices or delivery times, but we're going to do our best. And they said that they've never done more business in their lives. And so they moved this whole, back office IT over thinking it to the front, and I just had a simple IT solution.
So last question, because we're just about out of time. Are the panel optimistic that businesses will thrive over the next 1 to 5 years? Alistair?
Yeah, I think they'll either turn left or right. Yeah, so some businesses won't. It'll accelerate people turning left and accelerate people turning right. And those that end up turning left and don't exist, it'll just provide more opportunity for new businesses and others. It was ever thus.
Vikram?
There's a Greek philosopher who said the only constant is change. And this is just a kind of very accelerated version of this. And I'm with Alistair completely on this. There are a number of, I hate to use the word because it's so negative, but it describes a number of zombie companies. And that's going to be pulled out of the economy. And out of that, it's almost like the England with this philosophy, to destruction comes creativity.
Eileen?
Yeah, I would go for thrive. I'm forever optimistic, but realistic. And I don't think I've ever seen more innovation in my whole working career than I have in the last year. And I speak for myself when I say that. And I've also seen, and again in my own business, recruitment, but with the East Midlands Chamber, more people setting up businesses. There's been, I don't know the exact number, but we've had so many businesses setting up. So yeah, I would say, and I think we've got to maintain that positive outlook, and I think we've genuinely got to support each other. Calls like today, I've learned a lot from everybody on the panel. I think calls like today are really important to share best practice, but also make you feel like you're not just out there on your own. So yeah, I'm optimistic.
And finally, Kenny?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities out there for all sorts of businesses to grab the thing by the scruff of the neck and drive things forward. If you're positive and back yourself, then I think as businesses you'll survive and thrive. The ones that will fall will be, dare I say it, the weak businesses that would probably have struggled anyway. So I think if you're a dynamic company looking to the future and you've got ambition and you've got passion, then I firmly believe that you'll do well over the next few years.
Mm-hmm. Right, well, I would love to thank our panel. I would love to be able to do it in the old-fashioned way by going like that, but nobody will hear me. But on behalf of all the participants, I think you've done an excellent job for us. We've really enjoyed listening to you. It's amazing the number of comments that I've had over the last half an hour from the audience saying how much they really have enjoyed listening to you and how much they've learned by hearing some of the things you've had to say. So Eileen, Alistair, Kenny, Vikram, thank you very much for giving us your time, giving us your insights, and certainly giving us something to think about going forward.
Pleasure. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Just to round off the morning then, because we've come to the end of the conference, and hopefully that you found it interesting, educational, and enjoyable. That was certainly our intention. I think that we've had an insight into, early on, we had an insight into restructuring, which is not necessarily something anybody wants to think about, but it's certainly something that may be required at some stage in the future for somebody. We've had the Minister giving us an update on some of the things the government are doing, and there's no doubt that they are providing some support, which is vital to the business community. I know there are people out there that are not getting the help they think they need, and there are still some anomalies in there. And we then had our panel who really, I think, opened our eyes to the concept of people. I think really, if there was one message that came across from the panel, it was, you know, it's about people. It's about people being able to do different things and being able to move businesses in a different direction. And certainly the time needs to be spent in communicating, working with people, upskilling them where necessary. So I think we covered a number of points. I think as UK business advisors, I will finish by saying that we hope that while this is the first conference we've had, it won't be the last. We hope that if you do have any business needs, if you need some help, if you need some advice, or even if you just want to chat, please contact any of us, because we are here to help. And I would like to thank you all for attending and hope everybody keeps safe. Thank you very much indeed.